little discussion tonight. This is a question that is similar to questions we've asked before, but with a little twist to it. Here's your opening question for tonight. Talk about someone you know that has changed the world for good. What risks did they have to take? One of the things I love about the Bible is all the stories that it tells. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, world changers. The story we're going to look at tonight is about a woman named Esther. She definitely qualifies as a world changer. Now, you can find this story in the book of Esther in the Old Testament, and I would encourage you to read this on your own because I'm going to have to condense it for time tonight. So stay with me, there's a lot going on here. Here's the background. 2,500 years ago, the Jews are under the control of the Persian Empire, which covers basically the entire Middle East. Here's a little map for you. The king of Persia, Xerxes, he's kind of full of himself. He gives this huge banquet, invites all the most important people in the whole kingdom to come to this banquet in honor of himself. So all his friends come from hundreds of miles around, and in the course of this banquet, Xerxes gets drunk. And while he's drunk, he decides he wants to show off his beautiful wife, Vashti. He wants to show her off in front of all the guys. But Vashti doesn't like this idea very much, and she refuses to join the king's party. So King Xerxes kicks her out of the kingdom entirely. No more Queen Vashti. There is now a vacancy in the queen position for all of Persia. Now, King Xerxes figures out pretty quickly that he liked having a beautiful queen, but he can't really get her back because, well, some things can't be undone. So the king's guys get together and they decide, let's choose a new queen, and to do this, we'll have a beauty pageant. Except this is no ordinary beauty pageant as we think of it today. Of course, it's more than scholarship money that's at stake. The winner of this pageant gets to be queen of all of the Persian kingdom. Now here's where Esther enters the story. Esther is a Jewish orphan girl. Her parents died when she was young, and she was adopted by another family member named Mordecai. Except now Esther is all grown up. In fact, the Bible says that Esther had a lovely figure and was beautiful. So Esther is chosen to enter this beauty contest. And before she goes to join all the other women, Uncle Mordecai gives her some instructions. He says, don't tell anyone you're a Jewish girl. Don't tell anyone your family background, where you came from, but especially don't tell them that you are a Jew. Now, in some ways, this beauty pageant sounds a little bit like our modern day version of The Bachelor. A bunch of women living together trying to win the king's favor. But before they get presented to the king so he can choose one of them, they go through a whole year's worth of beauty treatments, that sort of thing. And Esther is everybody's favorite. Not just because she's beautiful, all the girls are beautiful, but Esther has something special about her, and she wins the favor of everyone who is around her. They all love her because Esther has some kind of inner beauty as well as outer beauty. Even all the other girls love her, which is difficult to imagine if you've seen even one episode of The Bachelor. And when the time finally comes, after this year of preparation, and the girls are presented before the king, and Esther's turn comes up, and the king is just blown away. He immediately loves her. Of course, she's beautiful, but she's got something about her that separates her from all the other women. The king is enthralled with her. He immediately chooses Esther, and he crowns her the new queen of Persia. They have a big banquet. They have a holiday. All hail the new queen, Esther. And that's a pretty good story, right? Little Jewish orphan girl grows up to become queen of all Persia. But all of that is just a setup for the real drama. Now, if it's going to be a really good story, if it's going to be a world changing kind of story, then there has to be treachery, there has to be intrigue, there has to be conflict, there has to be a villain. And here's where the villain comes in. The villain's name is Haman. He's the king's right hand man. He's the second most powerful person in the whole kingdom. He gets the king to make a law that says when Haman rides by, everybody has to bow down to Haman. So all the people do it, all except one person. Mordecai refuses to bow down to Haman. Now, Mordecai has been raised in the Jewish tradition where you believe that there is one true God. And Mordecai gladly worships the one true God, but that means he's not going to worship anyone else. He's not going to bow down to this Haman guy. So Haman gets really ticked off, and he not only wants to destroy Mordecai, he wants to destroy all of Mordecai's people, all the Jews in the whole empire. In fact, Haman goes to King Xerxes and he says, "Look, King, there's a group of people in your kingdom. They're not like us. They don't live by our rules, and I would like your permission to just get rid of all of them." And Haman gets permission to destroy all of the Jews in the entire kingdom. We would call this genocide today, the murdering of an entire group of people. And when you think about it, this is not the only time in history that the Jewish people are going to be targeted, is it? Mordecai hears about Haman's evil plan, and he's devastated by this. So he makes a plan of his own. Remember, Mordecai knows the queen. He raised the queen from the time she was a little girl. So Mordecai goes to Esther and tells her about Haman's evil plan. He tells Esther, "You're really the only shot we have here. You can go to the king and beg him for mercy for the Jews." But Esther has a problem. You don't just go to the king and ask for stuff. You have to be summoned to go to the king. If you're not summoned and you just show up asking for stuff, the law says the king can have you executed. So Esther's in this really tough spot. If she goes to the king to beg for mercy for the Jewish people, she faces possible execution. If she doesn't go to the king, all of the Jews in the kingdom will be destroyed, including her own family. So Mordecai leans on her just a little bit harder, and he says this to her: "If you do nothing, then God will send somebody else to rescue us, but it will not go well for you." And then he says this: "Maybe you were made queen for just such a time as this." Now we're going to pause here because we need to talk about this. I want you to spend just a couple of minutes. Imagine that you are in Queen Esther's position. What do you think you would do? I'm guessing that we all hope that we would be brave, that we would be willing to take a big risk. But do we really know what we would do? So here's what Esther does. She tells Mordecai, "Okay, you gather up all the Jewish people you can find, every Jew that lives in the city. You gather them together, you fast and pray for 3 days. I'll do the same with all of my attendants. We'll all fast and pray for 3 days. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I die, I die." This is a really significant commitment, obviously. She doesn't say, "Let me wait until I'm not scared anymore." She doesn't say, "My life is fine, I'm good the way I am, just leave me alone." She says, "Pray for me that I might be able to take this huge risk, a risk that could lead to my own death." I feel like we need to interrupt here and have another little discussion. So try this one on for size. Is there anything you are so committed to that you would risk your life for it? So Esther fasts and prays for 3 days. Mordecai prays and fasts for 3 days. All of the Jews in the city fast and pray for 3 days. And on the third day, it's time for Esther to approach the king. And she does it. And she's standing there in front of the king, and you can imagine she's probably trembling with fear and still wondering if he's going to have her executed. And the king holds out the golden scepter to her and says, basically, Esther, I am glad to see you. What can I do for you? Ask me for anything you want, up to half my kingdom. You can imagine a huge sigh of relief on Esther's part. Now, again, I'm going to challenge you to read this story for yourself because I'm going to have to leave out a lot of details. But here's the gist of what happens next. Esther lays out before the king Haman's evil plan. She points the finger at Haman and says, this is the man that's trying to kill off all these people. What you didn't know is that these people are my people. I never told you that I'm a Jew, but I am. And this Haman is trying to destroy all of my people. And King Xerxes does everything Esther asks him to do. He rescinds all the orders regarding the Jews. He has Haman executed. He makes new decrees that will protect the Jews for generations to come. He takes Mordecai and gives him Haman's old job. Mordecai is now second in command for the whole Persian kingdom. Esther and Mordecai took great risks, and they changed the course of history for an entire nation. Every year, and still to this day, the Jewish people celebrate the Feast of Purim, which is the day they remember the heroic things that Esther and Mordecai did to save the Jewish people. The Bible describes the holiday like this. It should be days of feasting and joy and giving presents of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Who would have ever thought that a little Jewish orphan girl would grow up to be a world changer? So what about you? Maybe you have been placed in a position for such a time as this. Next week, we're going to have a little ceremony. I'm going to ask you to spend the week thinking about this, praying about this. You can fast if you want to. And when we get here next Wednesday, I want you to be able to make a declaration. I want you to be able to fill in this blank here. I want to change the world for God by, and you fill that in, whether it's a word or two, whether it's a sentence or two. When we get here next Wednesday, I want you to be able to fill that out for yourself. And for everyone who's willing to make this declaration here, I have a little gift of encouragement that I want to give you. If God can use Esther, the little Jewish orphan girl, to change the world, maybe he wants to use you and me to change the world too.